50 Cent is widely regarded as one of the most ruthless and formidable figures in the history of hip-hop, known for his relentless approach to both the rap game and the streets. Today, we're diving deep into one of the wildest and most unexpected stories from his career, how he ended up getting involved with none other than El Chapo, one of the most notorious drug lords in history, all in an effort to retrieve a stolen GUnit spinner chain back in 2004. At the time, GUnit was at the absolute pinnacle of their success. 50 Cent had taken the industry by storm with his groundbreaking debut album Get Rich or Die Tryin', which quickly became one of the most iconic hip-hop albums of all time. Off the momentum of that success, GUnit followed up with another massive release, Beg for Mercy, which further cemented their dominance in the rap world. Meanwhile, Lloyd Banks was making waves with his own solo project, The Hunger for More, which dropped in May of 2004, and Young Buck soon followed up with his debut album, Straight Outta Cashville, a few months later. With hit records flooding the airwaves and GUnit's reputation reaching legendary status, the crew was being booked for shows across the country, performing in front of sold-out crowds everywhere they went. During this whirlwind period of fame, Lloyd Banks and Young Buck decided to hit the road to promote their respective solo projects, scheduling performances in different cities to capitalize on their rising popularity. One of the stops on their tour was Chicago. As always, GUnit traveled with a sizable entourage, ensuring they had strength in numbers in case anything went down. However, 50 Cent, always hyper-aware of potential dangers, gave them a strict warning before the trip. He made it clear that while they were in Chicago, they were not to go out partying or let their guard down under any circumstances. He had a gut feeling that something could go wrong, and he wanted his team to remain cautious. His instructions were simple: handle business, do the show, and head straight back to the hotel afterward. Lloyd Banks and Young Buck both respected 50's orders and had every intention of following them. However, they found it difficult to keep their entire crew under control, especially when it came to their longtime friends who weren't used to this level of discipline. When they arrived in Chicago, the two rappers stuck to the plan. They started the day with a radio interview and later performed at a concert that night. After the show, they followed 50's instructions and went straight back to their hotel rooms, ready to relax and get some rest. However, not everyone in their entourage was on the same page. Young Buck's close friend, known as D-Tay, had different plans. D-Tay wasn't just any random member of the crew. He and Buck had grown up together in Nashville, running the streets from a young age. Their bond was deeper than just music. Asking for cover charges. To them, anyone wearing something that flashy had to be connected, so they let D-Tay and his homies walk in without a problem. But while security might have been impressed, not everyone in the club shared the same admiration. Before they even stepped inside, D-Tay and his crew had been chilling outside, talking to some women near the entrance. Everything seemed normal at first, but then D-Tay started noticing something strange. One of the girls he was flirting with kept glancing over his shoulder, as if she was distracted by something behind him. He quickly realized that she wasn't just looking aimlessly. She was tracking someone's movement. Sensing something was off, D-Tay turned around just in time to see a small group of guys, 3 or 4 of them, crossing the street and heading straight toward them. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The guys walked past without saying a word and went right inside the club. With no confrontation, D-Tay brushed it off and went back to his conversation, but just a few minutes later, everything changed. One of the guys from the group suddenly doubled back. Before D-Tay could react, a single gunshot rang out. He felt the air shift near his foot and saw the spark from the bullet hitting the pavement. Then, before he could even register what was happening, he heard a voice behind him say, "Give me that." Before he knew it, someone was yanking at the GUnit spinner chain from behind. D-Tay, running on pure instinct, grabbed onto the chain, refusing to let it go. His homie, realizing what was happening, immediately pulled out his own gun and started firing back. Chaos erupted as both sides exchanged gunfire right outside the club. For a few intense seconds, bullets were flying in both directions. But then, in the middle of the shootout, D-Tay got a good look at the size of the gun the robber was holding. In that moment, reality hit him. This wasn't worth dying over. Instead of risking his life, he let go of the chain, yanked it off his neck, and handed it over to the robbers. The moment they had it in their hands, they took off running down the street, disappearing into the night. With the chain gone and the situation too hot to escalate, D-Tay and his crew did the only thing they could do: they left. D-Tay snuck back into the hotel, completely shaken by what had just happened. Instead of making a scene, he went straight to bed, hoping to sleep it off and figure out what to do in the morning. But the next morning, D-Tay had no choice but to come clean. He had to tell Young Buck what had happened. Buck was furious. He knew this was exactly what 50 Cent had warned them about. Not only had D-Tay ignored the orders to stay in, but he wasn't even supposed to have the spinner chain in the first place. And now, thanks to one reckless decision, GUnit's reputation was on the line. Losing that chain wasn't just about money. It was about pride, respect, and the image of one of the toughest rap crews in the game. If word got out that someone had snatched a GUnit chain at gunpoint, it would be a major embarrassment. When 50 got on the phone, he asked to speak directly to D-Tay. His first question wasn't about the chain. He simply asked, "Are you all right?" That's when 50, keeping his voice calm, said, "As long as you're safe, it's cool." But that calm was deceptive. 50 Cent wasn't the type to explode over the phone, especially since he always assumed his calls were being tapped by law enforcement. He kept his tone level, but anyone who knew him understood. He was furious. The moment the call ended, the decision was made. D-Tay was done. 50 Cent immediately kicked him off the tour. Not only that, but he was completely cut off from Young Buck and the rest of GUnit. For the next few months, he wasn't allowed to have any contact with the crew. Meanwhile, Buck stayed behind in Chicago, determined to find out who had taken the chain. He was ready to do whatever it took to get it back. But Chicago was a big city, and the streets weren't talking, at least not to him. After a few days of searching with no results, Buck was forced to leave the city and rejoin the tour in Atlanta. But this wasn't over. Soon after, the people who stole the chain started making moves. They wanted to cash in on their new trophy, first. They tried to sell it back, reaching out to people in the industry, hoping to flip it for $100,000. They even got in contact with some people connected to the game, hoping to work out a deal, but the game's team wasn't willing to pay that much, and the negotiations fell apart. Since they couldn't sell the chain, the guys who took it decided to take their clout to the next level. They started doing interviews, bragging about how they snatched it from D-Tay. They made it known that it wasn't even a planned robbery. They had just been mad about not getting into the club and saw an opportunity when they spotted D-Tay flexing outside. To make things worse, they started rocking the GUnit spinner chain in their own music videos. What had started as a simple night out had turned into a full-blown embarrassment for GUnit. But 50 Cent wasn't the type to take an L quietly. He was about to pull some serious strings to make sure the situation got handled, and that's when the El Chapo connection came into play. Stay tuned as we break down how this chain-snatching incident escalated to a level no one expected, leading all the way to one of the most powerful crime figures in history, with the stolen GUnit spinner chain making its rounds on the streets of Chicago and the internet buzzing with news about the robbery. 50 Cent knew he had to act fast. The chain wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of power, success, and dominance in the rap game. If he didn't handle the situation properly, it could permanently damage GUnit's reputation. Young Buck, still determined to recover the chain, immediately started hitting up every major radio station in Chicago, letting people know he was looking for someone who could help. Fact, D-Tay had even saved Buck's life at one point, further strengthening their loyalty to each other. Because of their history, Young Buck always kept D-Tay close and even brought him along on tour as his official hype man. During performances, D-Tay would sometimes rock the legendary GUnit spinner chain, an iconic piece of jewelry that had become a symbol of the group's dominance. Designed by Lloyd Banks, the chain featured the GUnit logo in the center, engineered to spin like a wheel, a concept that had never been seen before in hip-hop. The spinner chain became a staple of GUnit's image, frequently seen in their music videos, photo shoots, and live performances. It represented their success, their power, and how far they had come from the streets. In the hip-hop world, wearing a chain isn't just about flaunting wealth, it's a statement. And getting your chain snatched is one of the most humiliating things that can happen to a rapper. It's more than just a robbery, it's an attack on your credibility. Losing a chain can make people question whether your street reputation is real or just an act. At that time, GUnit was seen as the toughest crew in the game, and if word got out that one of their chains had been taken, it could seriously damage their reputation. That's exactly why 50 Cent had been so adamant about everyone staying alert and avoiding unnecessary risks. But despite his warnings, things took a turn for the worse. D-Tay, moving with his own mindset, decided to step out that night against 50's advice. While he was out, he ended up getting the iconic GUnit spinner chain snatched right off his neck, at gunpoint. So, what happened next? And how did 50 Cent end up getting linked to El Chapo over this situation? Buckle up, because the rest of this story is just as wild as the beginning. The time, the GUnit spinner chain was one of the most famous pieces of jewelry in hip-hop. It wasn't just a flashy accessory, it was a status symbol. Young Buck initially wore it frequently, but as he became more successful, he got his own custom chain and eventually passed the legendary spinner piece down to his hype man, D-Tay. The chain held significant value, not just in terms of money but also in reputation. Whenever DT was on stage, he would wear the chain to hype up the crowd, adding to the larger-than-life image of GUnit. However, there was one rule. He wasn't supposed to wear it unless he was performing. But that rule didn't stop him when they arrived in Chicago after the concert. Young Buck headed back to the hotel with a woman, choosing to call it a night. DT, on the other hand, wasn't ready to sleep just yet. He had never been to Chicago before, and he was eager to explore the nightlife. One of his friends from the city invited him out, and despite 50 Cent's warnings about avoiding unnecessary risks, DT was determined to see what Chicago had to offer. There was just one problem. DT didn't want to wait in line or pay a cover fee at the club. He wanted everyone to recognize that he was rolling with GUnit and to get VIP treatment wherever he went. So, instead of heading out as just another guy in the crowd, he made a bold move. He snuck into Young Buck's hotel room and grabbed the iconic spinner chain, putting it on before heading out for the night. But DT and his crew didn't go to just any regular nightclub. Instead, they ended up in one of the most infamous areas in Chicago, the Cabrini Green projects. At the time, Cabrini Green was considered one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. It had a long-standing reputation for crime, gang activity, and violence. The housing project was largely controlled by the Gangster Disciples, one of the most powerful street gangs in the country, known for running drug operations and keeping a tight grip on their territory. To put things into perspective, Cabrini Green wasn't just a rough neighborhood, it was a war zone. There were stories about the Gangster Disciples placing snipers on the rooftops of the buildings to keep an eye on their turf and take out anyone they saw as a threat. It was not the kind of place an outsider, especially one wearing flashy jewelry, should be walking around at night. DT, however, probably had no clue just how serious things were. In his mind, he believed that simply being associated with GUnit would protect him. On the East Coast, GUnit had a powerful reputation, and most people wouldn't dare test them. But Chicago was different. 50 Cent had already sensed potential danger in the city, which is why he explicitly told everyone to stay in their hotel rooms after the show. DT ignored the warning and was about to learn the hard way why 50 had been so cautious. By the time the concert wrapped up, it was already late at night, and most places were shutting down.